Hey everyone, Network Field Day 29, Day 3 is over. And that means Network Field Day 29 is also over. We had two great presentations today, and the first one was Graphiant, and this was really fun. So I've been in a lot of different places, seen a lot of different, a lot of different conferences, seen a lot of different presentations, but something I've not really had the privilege to do is be part of a launch, like an actual product launch from a new company. And technically speaking, Graphiant launched yesterday, and they had all the press at their headquarters and whatnot. But today was the first public presentation to a technical audience, and I get to be part of that audience, and that was very fun. So I'm going to step through different parts of the conversation, and I'm not even going to try and attempt to represent or re-represent or replay the entire conversation because there was a lot going on in there. I am going to try and bring out some of the salient points and really some more of the pointed conversation that we had as part of their sort of launch today. And I think that was very smart of them to bring their first technical conversation out to an audience like this for multiple different reasons. Just within the Network Field Day delegate panel at this session, there were there were 12 of us, and we were widely diverse in terms of industries that we supported, in terms of size of environments, just in a lot of different ways that I think it was a good venue for them to launch into. But it wasn't just the 12 of us. Occasionally, we get questions from the audience, more or less, from other people on Twitter or just within the internal Tech Field Day communication channels. But for this session, that there was a lot of that. There were questions from Twitter. There were questions internally on those Slack channels. So not only did Graphiant get the benefit of the delegates who were participating physically and remotely, but previous delegates as well who were very interested in what they were doing. So I know it's probably a bit biased saying that I really appreciated that this was the first conversation, but it was really great to start there. So when the whole presentation kicked off, we went into a lot of their SD-WAN type solution and started talking about how the new normal network is a very abnormal network, that networks aren't really as standard and as structured as they used to be. And you start looking at cloud services and on-prem services. On-prem is kind of the same that it's been forever, but when you start introducing the cloud, there are so many variables in there that, again, non-standard becomes standard. And that made a lot of sense. I really appreciated the slides that they went into talking about that. Within the current product, they're focusing on 4 specific verticals, and those were financial, healthcare, manufacturing, and retail. And they have 3 specific use cases in there, which were network edge, cloud connectivity, and business-to-business connectivity. So they're not, I granted those are relatively large use cases, but they're not trying to boil the ocean today. And some of this conversation will come up a little bit later as well, that it's day 1 or day 2, however you want to look at it. So they have a specific approach right now, and we'll see how well it works for them long term. So the first thing that I wanted to get into, and this actually came a little bit later in the conversation, but I'm going to go ahead and bring it to the front here, was the hardware platform. And they are not white box, and we had a long conversation about what white box meant. So they are using hardware, that can be used in a white box scenario. So if you look at other white box switch manufacturers, sorry, the software side, the actual switching software, what has a tendency to happen is you can get into a bit of a finger pointing match if the switch software manufacturer or developer says no, this is a hardware problem, but then the hardware side is saying no, that's not us, that's the software, and they're just pointing at each other. But what you're getting with Graphiant is not, you're not buying the hardware. You can, and there is a path to just buy the hardware. However, if you are consuming their service, what you're getting is the network as a service, which means that you're also getting the hardware as part of that price. So ultimately, what that means is that you're paying a monthly bill for Graphiants. However, that's the direction that everybody is going. So even though you're paying for different internet circuits and licensing and support and just everything that all those revolving costs that are out there, if the industry is going to continue to go in this direction, then it sort of makes sense for Graphiant to develop a model where you just pay them the monthly or yearly fee, however that breaks out, and you get the hardware as part of that. And what that means, really, if we took that whole conversation that we had, which I think we talked about it for almost 20, maybe 25 minutes, just boil it down, is you do have one phone number to call if there's a problem. So if it's a hardware problem, that's fine. You call Graphiant and they take care of it because they're taking care of the hardware as part of the service. It's kind of like an apartment rental. You know, you're just paying the fee and you're getting everything that comes with it. You know, including the walls and the ceiling, and for them that means the actual hardware as well. So it's nice to know that even though they're using hardware that other people use in a white box sense, they don't like to call it white box, and I guess they probably shouldn't, because they do support it as part of that service model. Again, you're paying for the service, which includes the hardware. So that was cool. All right, so now we start talking about how they're actually moving the data around. So they have these endpoints that you would deploy at two of your locations, let's say, and then they have this core that they have put together inside 6 Equinix data centers around the United States. And that's where they are today. They're only in the United States, but also, again, remember, this is day one. So, and the way that those 6 sites were chosen, or the way that they were built out, relied heavily on the companies that they were able to get to participate in their early field trials. So essentially what they ended up telling us was that anywhere that Equinix has a metal, where they can support the Equinix metal product lineup in a data center, that is a place that they can rapidly deploy into, because it is ultimately just a few U of hardware that they need to install in those places, and then they can bring those data centers into this what they call the stateless core. That's what it was. Into their stateless core design, where the magic happens. So from site A to site B, you send your data out and it hits that box and gets encrypted at that box. So when it enters Graphiant's network, it's already encrypted and gets routed through their network based on tags. And I believe there's some other routing products out there that use tags to determine routing. I've not encountered them, but it seemed like a pretty novel approach, because once it gets into their network and it's encrypted, so your encryption keys, the decryption keys, aren't inside their network at any point. You control those. And if you're using your own CA to do that encryption, or you're using a public CA. I don't remember the full list, but it sounded like they were pretty flexible, even down to Let's Encrypt. You can use them as a CA to encrypt your traffic. But once it is in their network, if an intruder gets into their network, they can't actually see your traffic. They can't see your data because you've encrypted it at your edge and they don't have the keys. The worst they can do is disrupt data flow. But currently these 6 POPs that they have out there are fully meshed. They did let us know that down the road, when newer ones come online, they may not all be fully meshed. That the end picture may result in more of a ring around the country with direct communications, like some north-south lines or some east-west lines. If they have 500 data centers, obviously they can't full mesh that. I don't know how many Equinix Metal data centers there are in the United States, but that's where it can be disrupted. So if one of those gets disrupted, then there are paths around it today, and there will be longer term, but mesh today won't be mesh forever. So you're in their network. They use their tags to move you along, and what they're using is modified BGP to move that through their network, and they're hopeful that the way that they have modified BGP will become ratified. And obviously, that's not today. They have to prove that out. They have to grow it, use it more, hopefully get other organizations to buy onto it, and then ratify those modifications that they've made that help them drive those routing decisions, the encryption that they put on top of it. So something that they were very clear is that these are not tunnels that get built. So when it hits your edge and goes into their network, you've put encryption on top of it. Then they put encryption on top of it as well. And the speed that you're getting here, even with all this encryption put on top of it, is between 50 meg to 20 gigs per second. And that's the ideal range that they're trying to. That's the ideal bandwidth that they can handle today. So it's not for everyone, and I think that's usually the case with early products because they are using space within these data centers within their interconnects. So they can't sell you the world today, and even the hardware has limitations as well. But that's a bit how that comes together, and how the encryption that they put on top of it doesn't really impact the bandwidth limitations in there. That those limitations are more based on the data centers today and will scale up as they scale the hardware up. So when we start talking about the problems that they solve and how they sort of accelerate this traffic in their version of SD-WAN, you still have to go over the internet to get to these Equinix data centers. And depending on where you're located, that can be a problem. So one of the delegates in the room, who actually lives in Indiana, where I live, he has a struggle from his location, which is more like central northern Indiana, to get to the Equinix Metal data center in Chicago. He has to go from his location to Indianapolis, from Indianapolis up to Chicago. And that introduces latency just getting to Chicago that already breaches the SLA that Graphiant was advertising. Because what they were saying is, well, we'll make sure that you're only no more than 15 milliseconds away, and that's a bold claim, and part of me wants to go, obviously that's not going to work for everyone, but just the kind of that repeating message is, take a step back, take a breath, and realize how new this is. That that's okay, because Graphian's not saying that they can solve or even make better. Let's not even call it solve. They can't make better the communication from your edge to the data center. They can't do that. Nor can they do so we'll call it the front 25% of any network path. Nor can they do the last 25% once it comes out of the other data center and goes to that remote site. They can't solve or really make better the front 25 or the back 25. Their goal is to take that middle 50% and make that better, and make better routing decisions in there, and move you through less congested paths through there, because that is what they can control. So I don't know how necessary that 15 millisecond statement is, because there's just a lot of places that no matter what, you can't get better than 15 milliseconds to the data center. So yeah, I don't know, maybe if that messaging shifts a bit down the road, or maybe that's who they're trying to hit today, are those people who are 1 or 2 hops away from a data center in a major metro, even not even a major metro, just like a more populated area. But I do think generally across the board, though, so let's take my friend from Indiana. If he needed to go from Indiana to California, that center 50%, he's still going to have to transverse the rest of the public internet to get across. And then if there are outages, you'll have to get around those outages. So there could still be, I could still see it being beneficial. But the 15 millisecond thing, that's not going to work for everyone. But it is day 2 or day 1 again, so maybe it won't work for everyone. But that was... There was a good bit of conversation around there, but I get it. They can't boil the ocean. The next thing that they talked about, which I thought was really interesting, was business-to-business type communications. So in normal operations, just normal enterprise operations, and when I was in healthcare, I did this a lot in healthcare, and we had another delegate in the room who was also in healthcare, and he really got this message as well, is you need to have a lot of tunnels, VPN tunnels, just traditional VPN tunnels in healthcare. And that's for reaching out to different vendors, different hardware vendors, different data processors. I feel like there was upwards of around 100 VPN tunnels at the hospital group that I worked at. And there's a way around that with the Graphiant network as well, because if you're both in that network, well, then you can sort of, again, just shortcut the internet and go through their system. So it takes a lot of the firewalls out of the picture. I mean, not all of them. You're likely still going to want security, right? People still want security. You don't have to necessarily worry about the VPN head ends, and you still have to manage it somehow. I didn't quite get the somehow, but that is something that they're looking to do, is have these business-to-business communications in there that can still take the benefit of Graphiant putting all this together, and then bring that in a business-to-business conversation. And we didn't get too heavy into that because truthfully, we spent a lot of time talking about the hardware, talking about the way that the overall network is architected. But I think if you just kind of still think about all of the benefits that are out there and the way that they move the traffic and the way they encrypt the traffic and everything, that it's easy to flip that around and say, okay, I can understand how that will work for business to business, or at least that's what I've done. And then the very last thing, which it's funny. So they showed us one demo, and it was a 10-minute pre-recorded demo at the very end of this. like 2.5 hour session. I don't remember exactly how long it was, and the time just flew. Sometimes you have 1 hour demos that by the end it feels like an hour. Maybe it feels like a little more, but by however much time they had, I could have listened to them for another half hour, easily an hour, if we were going to start getting into demos. But the demo that they showed us did let us see the panel, which I will say I was very pleased with what I saw on the administrative side. And there is there's a problem right now in SD-WAN, and it extends to a lot of other technologies as well, that they're very, very, I don't want to say hard. There's a very high administrative overhead when it comes to putting some newer SD-WAN solutions together. And the company is ripe with people from Viptela. So I called Viptela out specifically because I recently recertified my CCNP Enterprise using Viptela classes and just getting a better understanding of how to administer that product. And there's a high amount of administrative overhead to put that together. And something that I saw very quickly and commented on was it didn't seem like the administrative overhead was overly high. And I don't think that that means that the system is any less powerful, but um, since Graphiant is managing all of that centerpiece on their own, there are just fewer things that you need to administer. So it makes that administration platform that's exposed to you as an end user more refined, more streamlined, and a bit easier to interact with. So what they ended up showing us with that demo, though, which is kind of funny, which ended up being basically the third use case, was cloud connectivity. And we had spent so much time just hitting the hammer on all of these other bits that when they were showing us the demo, and it said, "Oh, look, here's the response time for Teams and for WebEx, and I think maybe like for Dropbox," and then it just kind of like, oh, that's right. It's also an SD-WAN solution, like kind of what you're typically accustomed to in terms of getting you to Teams better and routing around network issues that internet issues, that they're not just getting you from your site A to your site B or from your business to another business, that they're also in there getting you to cloud applications more rapidly because they're deploying these POPs in data centers where they have direct adjacency into those cloud services. And I've seen services like this before where companies say, we'll take you into a data center, we get you into that POP, and then we move you around. And I've seen some be successful. I've tested with others that have been less than successful, at least in terms of my proof of concept. So it's not as if what Graphiant has put together has never been done before. I definitely think that it's pretty unique approach in terms of the way that you consume it. That basically it's network as a service, SD-WAN as a service. I don't know exactly what to call it, but just that demo sort of regrounded me in that element. But it wasn't anything that we talked too in depth about because that was about the time that we ran out of time. And the conversation was really, really good. There were people at the ends, delegates at the ends, who very, very aptly pointed out, "This isn't for me. We're going to deploy anything like this. We don't have needs like this. We need to own hardware," which you can do. There is a way to own the hardware. But to me, all of those critiques, I don't want to call them criticisms, we'll call them critiques, really sort of came back to, it's day one. It's day two. Graphiant has a lot of time. They're well funded right now. It sounded like they have some pretty big names who are helping them with their early field trials, which appear to be very successful just based on everything that they've shown us. But obviously, time is the true test here. So I cannot wait to see where Graphiant goes with it. I feel like this was a as strong of a representation as they could give on day one. I hope that they start getting some of the language cleared up in these presentations as they deliver more of them and get more feedback from engineers, from prospective customers, because a lot of the things that we were sort of hitting them on could easily be countered if that data was already in the deck. And I think that was a great way that we were a great audience for them to start with so that we can point out those things. So when we have that 20-minute conversation about white box, that they can come up with a better way to message that. And when we need to talk more about, well, hey, what about the front 25, the back 25, and the middle 50, that they can start putting the language together in their presentations so that it's not as a labor intensive process to elicit all that information. That if they can start getting that messaging together and just continue the work that they've been doing, I think they're going to have a lot of success. Obviously, they're the 4 industries right now. They're the 6 pops in the United States. They said that they're going to be going international. I believe it was next year. So hopefully they do that. They stick to that, and we see more of them. We see more growth from them. And who knows? Maybe in a couple years we get to we get to go to Graphiant Live and check them out there. So that was Graphiant. I know I went on for almost a half hour here, but I think it was worth it just because they were so new. There was a lot of information, and I know there were a lot of people out there who were very interested in what they were going to announce. So I really wanted to spend the time breaking down the conversations we had in the room and sharing my feedback to everyone. So there was one other presentation today. I'm going to go ahead and cap this one off, though, and split that one into its own video. But thank you, Graphians, for coming out to Network Field Day 29, Day 3. I loved hearing from you and seeing where you started. I can't wait to see where you go. Take care.